What advice do you have for newbies, Ben? Did you get to yours?
Oh no, I would say don't make your career your job, your entire personality.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a real problem that people in EMS, especially because this is painting with broad strokes, but we're a bunch of like weird misfits, who start out and. I came from a musical background, and then I did some archaeology, and then I did some computer programming, and I ran out of money. And, my parents ran out of patience, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go work retail. And I was a manager at a bookstore for 6 years before I finally was like, I'm tired of this. I'm going to go do something else. And found EMS and found that there were a lot of people sort of like me who were these, hyper like golden retriever running from one thing to another. And people got this sense of like, if I just work those 4 extra shifts this week, that's going to make the difference. Or, I'm going to double down. We've got all these people who are these amazing providers that I see in the hospital, that I see in the ambulance, that I see arriving with the fire apparatus. And I'm going to make that my thing. And then what happens is they last for like 18 months, 2 years, and then they're burned out. They can't do it anymore because they didn't stop to do things. At no point did they say, you know what? No, I'm not going to take that extra shift. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the system is built to sort of make you feel bad for letting down all your friends and your coworkers if you turn that down. But like, if you make it your whole personality and that's all you do, you can't sustain that. Or you turn into one of those people who 24 months later, even though you know nothing because you've been doing this for 24 months, which comparatively is not a lot, you are one of those people who's like, well, everybody's full of crap, right? You adopt this sort of like artificially cynical attitude to shield you from that feeling of like, I put all my all into this and it didn't help.
Yeah, I tell a lot of the new nurses that come through, and even some of our more seasoned ones, that you don't have to work all the extra shift. Like, the department will be fine. It will still run. Like, you have people who are like, oh man, I feel crappy. I need to call from work, but I don't want to because then you guys are going to be short. And it's like, the department will still run without you. Like, it is okay to take a day or like to take a vacation and, step back from it because it'll just regenerate, or like, what do you say?
Degenerate.
It'll degenerate from there, and you're just not going to be efficient anymore. And I think for me, not like I'm an old nurse. I've been doing it, like I said, 9-10 years now. But when I first started, it was like, work as many hours as you can. It's going to make you better. But I really don't think that's necessarily true. Like, you have to have that separation between job and personal life. You need that time to reset. So that way you can still be happy in the profession that you're doing. Because like, once you're burnt out, like, you're not a benefit to anybody anymore. Yeah. And that's one thing I wish like even just management knew, because for us, they're always looking for us to fill a shift. Like, hey, can you pick up this shift? Can you pick up that shift? Like, they'll text you personally. They'll call you and ask you. And you're like, no, I work my 3. That's it. I'm not doing any more unless I want to. But it's just really frustrating when you're always feeling the need to carry the department or pick up extra shifts to help out. And then you don't have your own life. Like, you're not able to separate the difference between, who you want to be or who you are, like, on your own, than being immersed. Like, I am just a nurse and that's all you do.
Well, I think your family remembers the extra shift you work a lot more than your employer ever will. I think it's, maybe your employer is going to be grateful for a few hours, but your family's going to remember that for, weeks that you're working extra. And I think not making our careers our entire personality is a great point, because it's, it's a facet of who we are, and it's, where we spend a lot of our time, but it's not who we are as people. And that's one reason I tell newer APPs to focus on getting off on time. Like, you should be doing all your notes actively through the day, dispoing patients. You should be finishing their chart. You should not be after your shift for 2 hours catching up on charts, because that's 2 hours now that you're not at home with your family or doing something you love. This job will take from you if you keep giving, so do whatever you can to get off your shift on time, because it's just not worth staying over hours for, because those hours add up.
Yeah, it's both incredibly freeing and incredibly humbling to see how very quickly you can be replaced, right? Like, for you, the individual, you're like, this is a big career change. And for them, they're like, we got 5 people waiting.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
And it really makes it obvious to you, wow, I didn't have to do all of that. I could have taken that day off. I could have not come in when I didn't feel well, and the world would have kept turning. So
there's times I'm like, hey, like when you work the mid shift, I'm like, hey, and I'm like, oh, bye. Here, he's done. Like, all of his stuff is wrapped up nice and neat. Like, there's no lingering or anything like that. It's like, you're efficient. You get out on time. You're not Like those docs, like I feel bad sometimes, like the night docs. I don't know if it ever happened to you, but they'll get done at 6, but they're like, I'm going to be here 3 more hours charting. And I was like, oh my God, that's like miserable. And then you're going to come back again and do it again tonight. And that's just going to quickly burn you out.
Mm-hmm. Some of it is inevitable, but a lot of it can be mitigated with how you approach when you document and your workflow throughout the shift. Yeah. But take care of yourself no matter what.
It's harder on the ambulance, I think, to focus on that get off on time mentality, because there's a lot more things that are outside of your control. You can't control when that call drops and you're a block from it on your way back to base to drop off your ambulance, or, you know, a lot of variables like that are less in your control, but you can still keep up on your reports throughout the day. If you've saved them all for the end of your shift, that's your fault. That's not the dispatcher's fault. Or, you know, there's more variables I think we can control as ER providers. We can control getting our charge done as we dispo patients. We can look ahead and be like, I'm supposed to be off in 2 hours. Which of these patients are not going to be done that I need to hand off to one of my colleagues? And you need to plan that ahead of time. You can't look at your watch and see, oh, I'm supposed to be off, and now figure out how to hand off patients. It needs to be done earlier than that, or else you're going to be late. And I think controlling the limited variables that we can control make that happen.
Yeah, even just as much as like, you know, I'm home, I'm not going to answer a call from work now. Like I got calls from time to time. Like I get home at 6 a.m. and go to sleep, and then wake up and see that my phone had like, you know, 4 different calls from the supervisor, and you know, I always kept my phone downstairs so it wouldn't wake me up. And they'd be like, well, I was trying to call you. Well, you know what my schedule is. What on earth made you think I'd be awake at like what for me is 2 a.m?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like absolutely not.
When we would get back to base, I don't know if this was per policy or not, but the radios are off. We're back at base. Radios are off. If they have another call, they need to figure out another ambulance to do it. We're getting off. And I think the culture is a lot better regarding that now. There's actually an adequate number of ambulances on the street, so hopefully that doesn't happen as much. But it waxes and wanes, right? And sometimes, you know, the coverage is very, very light, and so people also need to get to work on time too, which is, you know, sometimes a problem. If they're not there with their rig ready to go at their shift time, that's interfering with the rest of us getting off on time. And I'm sure that happens with nursing to a degree too. If your relief is not there in time to get some handoff reports and get the other shift off on time, that affects everybody else getting off on time too.
Yeah. I think definitely just finding something to do outside of work, though, that's completely different. I know I've heard, like, a couple people, like, just talking to some of the physicians, like, one of them said he likes fly fishing. I'm like, why would you like fly fishing? It sounds so boring. But they were like, it's just, like, it's mundane. Like, you don't have to put a lot of thought into it, because that's what you do all the time on a regular basis. Or, you know, one of the nurses that I work with, she camps on the regular. And she's like, I like to just get out and not really have to be meticulous about what I'm doing. I'm just out there, I hike, and I, you know, like she's backpack camping. So she's like, I'll hike to a point and I'll stop. I got tired, so this is where I'm going to set up camp for the night. And, you know, a lot of us read books. So we have like a little book club, and it's like, okay, let's read or whatever, but just something away from.
I see a lot of that erotica sitting around the ER.
Yeah, you do.
Did you write any of it?
I'm not at liberty to
Is this
say.
how you're pushing your books?
My pen name is not.
Yeah, are we supposed to shill for our books here? This book about cooking salmon.
You had a little excerpt. I heard it. I was like, where's the rest of the book? Not too bad.
What advice do you guys have for people that are having like a hard shift or struggling with burnout, you know, or just a difficult patient? Maybe you've seen it happen or dealt with it yourself. What advice kind of regarding burnout do you guys have?
So for, you know, there's like short-term burnout and long-term burnout. So, and there's obviously a lot of overlap. So the patient who just really gets under your skin and makes you feel like you had a terrible day, that's really like short-term burnout. Long-term burnout is more the hours, the constant stress, the lack of appreciation, the you know, all the different challenges. So kind of the approach needs to be a little different for both. For long-term burnout, from day one, like whether you're in school, residency, whatever it may be, you've got to have the mentality of I'm in this for the long haul. Taking care of yourself. If you cannot take care of yourself, you cannot take care of anyone else. As a parent, as a physician, as a paramedic, like you can't take care of other people until you take care of yourself. Be as hard as it is, have a healthy lifestyle, eating well, exercising. Also part of having a healthy lifestyle is relaxing. So sometimes doing nothing is extremely healthy because you're just allowing yourself to reset. And it's not easy in medicine. There's always something more to do. There's always a book to pick up. There's always a shift that you could pick up and make extra money, but you have to make yourself a priority, and you have to prioritize yourself over your job, because you can't do your job well until you're in a good spot. So, and your personal relationships, and that looks different for everyone. Some people are married, have kids, other people engaged, other people have a partner, some people are single, most people have at least friends or something. So do not let those relationships falter because you're too busy, you're too stressed out. You have the, what do we call it? When your empathy kind of runs out at the end of a shift, and then you're real short with your family members.
I know what you're talking about.
Is there a word for that?
Yeah, there's a term. I'll think of it probably later. But at any rate, take care of your relationships too. Yeah. Let your loved ones know that you love them. Spend quality time with them. And then your shift is going to be so much more productive. It's going to be so much more fulfilling. That's more kind of long-term burnout. Short-term burnout, like a patient who just is really awful to you, it's easier said than done, but don't take everything personally.
Yeah.
Because in the emergency room, we are very frequently are seeing someone on the absolute worst day of their life. Now, you can talk about how awful that is, or you can take pride in that. Like, I see so many people on the absolute worst day of their life, and I think that is humbling to be able to play that role in someone's life. But if it's the worst day of their life, they may not treat me so well. They may be under a lot of stress. They may be under a lot of drugs. I don't know. But don't take everything personally, because that will absolutely cause a lot of burnout. And understanding the environment you're in. It's one of the most challenging environments out there.
Yeah, I think drawing the distinction between acute and like chronic burnout's important, because it can just be one shift that burns you out because of a patient interaction, which is usually what it is. And that might just be a couple days off. You're recovered. You're ready to go again. That's left your mind. But yeah, the chronic burnout's the one I think that is a lot more difficult to combat, because it's it's a slow fade and it's a slow fix too. And so I think that's a good distinction.
Yeah, and just kind of learning to recognize what that looks like for you for the chronic burnout. Because like you guys said, like acute burnout, that's something where you're like, this patient's getting on my skin. You know, for us as nurses, you're like, you talk to your charge, you're like, hey, can I just, can somebody else take care of this patient or whatever, step in, help you out, blah, blah, blah. Where I feel like you guys don't necessarily get to do that as providers, but that part for acute. But for chronic is really acknowledging that you're starting to feel that way. Because I feel like so many people are like, oh, that's just part of the job, and they push it away, and then they let it build, and then they're at the point where they're just like, then they crash, and you're just like, well, what could we have done to prevent you from getting to that point of crashing? So it's just recognizing that for yourself, like, I have not taken time to do XYZ in 2 weeks, or I haven't done blah 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 and so much in this time or whatever, and really just kind of try to schedule it in too. I know a lot of us are very meticulous about our time, but like schedule in, like on Friday, I am going to hang out with whoever, or I'm going to take it as like I call it a rot day, where you just sit on the computer or on the couch all day, but just making sure you like kind of schedule it in. Like I knew I was coming to do this today, so I was like, I'm not doing homework this morning. I'm going to take a rot day, and then I'm going to get up and go over there. So, but just knowing like what you have coming up, so that way you kind of don't feel so overwhelmed all the time.
Yeah, I think it's going back to Lucas's point about taking care of yourself before you take care of patients. I think that's something I never really understood as a paramedic. I would make work priority. I picked up all the extra shifts, worked way too many hours, and, wasn't exercising, didn't drink any water throughout the day. And that's something that now I feel like I understand, is like, I can't really take great care of patients unless I've actually done something for myself that day first. Exercised, hydrated, eating well, like I'm going to go use the bathroom before I go see the next patient, because I don't want to feel the discomfort of having to pee for a half an hour. And most of our patients aren't dying. You can go use the bathroom before you see the next patient. It's not like we have to run from room to room most of the time. Some of our patients, you got to get up and go see them right away, but 95% of them, can wait for you to go pee so that you can actually listen to them when you go in the room.
I mean, that's even true of EMS, right? Like, nobody ever died in 10 seconds, and if they do, you couldn't possibly have stopped it, right? So taking that time to be like, yeah, I'm going to hit the restroom. No, I know we've got a call, and I'll tell you what, like, I'm not going to be giving good patient care if I am thinking about something else the whole time. Now, I would say for burnout, one of the big things is just recognize, and this has already been said, but like recognize when it's a problem. EMS is notoriously bad. I think technically law enforcement is worse, so we're they're number one. We might be number 2 or 3, but we're sort of notoriously bad at actually asking for help and getting help, and recognizing that there's a lot of denial, and there's a lot of it's whatever. I'll just power on through it. And so all the people that I know who still work in the field, because I only worked like 12, 14 years before I stopped doing part-time. A lot of people I know who've been doing it like 20, 25, 30 years. The only way they get through is having some sort of system. And maybe they're not getting therapy. Maybe they're not, going and getting like actual help from somebody else, but they have a system to help them like deal with it, rather than just saying, it's just the job, and like pushing it down and being like, it'll just go away on its own.
Yeah.
So, and time zero only flies one way, right? Like, recognize even in the moment for that acute kind of burnout, like tomorrow's coming, right? This is not going to last forever. So, get through this, do the thing, and then after a while, just be like, you know what? I'm probably never going to see that patient again. They might not think much of me, but it's okay. Now they're a report, and I did my best, and I can move on.
Were you talking about secondary trauma? Was that the word you were looking for?
No. Compassion fatigue.
Oh my God! I was like, someone already knew it was coming. When you said seeing things, I'm like, they reminded me.
No, compassion fatigue is what I'm talking about. Where you spend a whole shift just being very compassionate, very empathetic to people who may not be treating you well, and then you've had it and you go home to your spouse and you snap at them, and it's not their fault, it's your fault because you didn't manage your compassion. We oftentimes lash out at those who love us and support us the most, and that is easy to get caught in that trap. Another thing I would encourage people to not do is wearing these things as badges of honor that aren't good things, like, oh, I never eat during my shift. Like, wow, so you're real proud that you're not giving your body fuel and you're not having energy and you're going to have brain fog because you haven't had any carbohydrates in 9 hours. Like, why is that a good thing? Like, that's not that's not cool. Like, eat. You have to eat. Like, I don't care how busy my shift is. I eat.
I heard somebody say their pee was like brown at the end of their shift, and I was like,
ridiculous.
what?
I know. That was ridiculous.
What's happening?
Opposite of something to brag about.
Yeah, that will happen from time to time, but if that's happening regularly and you brag about it, you really need to reevaluate like some of the priorities, because you're not going to last forever if you
that's like with some of the nurses, you'll see, they're like, oh my God, so and so is sitting down, their assignment's full, and I was like, maybe they're just taking a minute to like recoup real quick. I'm like, hey, all right, let me just take a minute to breathe, and then I'm going to go back in and see the patients again.
And you're going to take better care of the patients if you do that anyway.
But then you have some of the nurses that just feel like they have like the bulldoze through, like you said, the entire 12-hour shift. Like, there's a patient in the room, I must see them now, and it's like, well, I'm sure they're okay. You don't have to go in there right now. If you need a minute to sit, drink your water, look at your phone for absent-mindedness for 2 minutes, it's okay.
Well, throughout the day, the little things to take care of yourself just aren't that time consuming. Take some bites of food, drink some water, use the bathroom, take a second to collect yourself. None of that stuff takes that much time that it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
And I'd also say, like, we're talking about a lot of the intentional habits to do, but also avoiding the ones that you don't want to do, the bad coping strategies, the heavy drinking after a shift, or, we all know people that have done the bad habits that probably feel great in the moment. I mean, I'm sure getting drunk after a shift probably feels great, but the next day you've done, multiple days of damage that you're going to have to recover from that now. And ultimately it's not going to serve you. It's avoiding chasing those short-term dopamine dumps, I think, is pretty key, because they feel great for a couple hours, but then they just do you so much longer-term damage for your mental health.
Yeah, night shift called it choir practice when they would find a bar that was still open at like 6 a.m. and like, all go meet together and just get absolutely wasted. And it never made any sense to me because I was like, but your job's still going to be there in 12 hours and now you're going to have a hangover.
Yeah.
What are you
like
doing?
Going home and going to bed and getting some sleep is going to, maybe not make you feel great right away. It's not what you want to do, but the next shift you're going to be set up for success as opposed to not.
Yeah.
We're tacitly encouraged to make selflessness to the point of damage a virtue. And so it's very hard to break out of that. Again, that sense of like, I'm letting everybody down. But yeah, you absolutely do have to put yourself first because otherwise...
Putting yourself first is not selfish at all.
No, not at all.
It allows you to be a better person for every single person you interact with the whole day.
And especially your family too. I think, your family will get left behind if you're not taking care of yourself even before you interact with your family sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody has done a study of like, divorce rates or whatnot, broken relationships in healthcare settings. But I'm sure the numbers are not stellar. Like it's probably not a good look for us as an industry.
Mm-hmm.
One of the trauma grand rounds, they had a discussion on that, and the study was looking at cardiologists and their spouses, satisfaction, like with their spouse's job based on how they come home and stuff like that. And you're right, it was the numbers that they put there. I was like, oh, that's shocking. The amount of divorces and burnout within 10 years and, dissatisfied families just because they do take on the like medicine, your heroes and blah, blah, blah. And then you're so engaged in your job that you're leaving, like you said, everything else behind.
Yeah. Some of the specialties probably are worse too at making that their entire identity too. And I mean, if you're announcing on your license plate what your job is, maybe it's taken a little bit.
It's never made any sense to me.
Or if every credit card has your title, like you find it so important to.
When I was a brand new,
people know. Like I don't want anyone to know.
No. Absolutely.
When I was a brand new EMT, I had an EMT hat. I think I got EMS license plates. That is no longer on my vehicle, but I did get EMS license plates. You can't pull over to hold C-spine if you don't have an EMS license plate.
No, it's true.
God forbid you pass a car accident, you got to pull over and hold C-spine.
Yeah,
Stabilize. You got to stabilize it.
We were like, what would you have? We asked about like if you had like a survival bag or something to that extent. And you're like, no, why? What am I going to do on this side of the road? Like everything I need is in the hospital. He's like, my best thing to do is to call 911 and tell them where the accident is.
Except for tourniquets. I would I would always encourage people to have tourniquets in their car and at home. That can save a life.
That's true.
Yeah. But for some reason that was like enlightening to me. I was like, oh my God, that makes sense.
No, I know doctors who have like intubation equipment
Crike
in their
kit.
car. I'm like, what?
You're like, what are you gonna do? Where's your ventilator now?
You got no IV, you got no bag valve mask, you got no ventilator, you got no hospital. You're just gonna throw a tube in someone's trachea.
Plus, I will not respect you if you pull over and crike somebody with your crike kit. I will not respect you. You have to improvise using a pin. That's right. You've got to improvise using what you got.
I've seen that.
Yeah. But to me, that was like kind of like, oh, like that's what you like. To me, what you're saying, like, don't always be your job 24/7 when you're driving around. You're like, oh, I'm gonna advertise. I can go save that person. It's like, you know what? I can't really do anything. My best thing to do is to call EMS.
I know a guy who hung his stethoscope over his rearview mirror, and his excuse was if he ever got pulled over, the cop would like ask him about it, and he'd be able to tell him he was a doctor. And I'm like, dude, that is is pompous. Come on,
like just slow down.
Let's be better than that.
Don't get pulled over.
Yeah,
we could,
The last time I got pulled over, I was on my way to a shift in Scrubs, and I was like, yeah, I'm one of the ER providers. Did not save me from a ticket.
I had one exactly where I was coming back from a shift, and I was apparently speeding, and I got pulled over, and I was still in uniform because I was headed home, and the officer got out and looked at me and goes, you going to work or coming back? I was like, coming back. And he's like, just go home and sleep. Don't do it again. I was like, okay.
Yeah, I got pulled over probably.
Like, that's it. That was the one time.
I got pulled over 5 times when I was an EMT/paramedic, and every single time they let me off when I was wearing uniform. Or one time I got off shift with a partner that had a new EMT come on, jumped on their ambulance to go run more calls, and I was driving home, and they were at an intersection. So I pulled up to mess with him, and I swerved my car towards the ambulance, and a cop was right across the street. And of course, the cop immediately lights me up, pulls me over, and I'm like calling him like, "You guys got to come tell him that I work. I just got off shift with you. I was just messing with you." And they let me off that time.
The pro move is they'll be like, "I've never seen this man. I know. But my partner's been missing for a week, and that is his uniform."
What else, you guys? Is there anything else you guys have burning on your minds to talk about? I always ask that, and there's always just silence. So
I don't want to break the tradition.
I think understand that everyone is a team. If you work as a team, you're going to be more efficient. You're going to be more satisfied. You're going to burn out less. You're going to learn more. Like everything. If I'm working, you asked about efficiency earlier. Well, a big part of that is working with the PAs and the NPs efficiently rather than redoing every single thing that they do and double checking every single thing they do.
Yeah.
Like that shows no trust, no confidence. You don't grow as a PA. I'm less efficient. Like we all have to work as a team. Yeah. And I've had, you ask if there's anything else we want to talk about. So I'm going to kind of unload something pretty heavy here. My son shot himself in the head in April. And that was an extremely humbling experience for me. He survived, but going through the process, there were police in my house. There were 8 police in my house, paramedic, EMT. He survived luckily, but any one of those people could have been the last person that my son saw and spoke to. And you know what? Every single person is my teammate. The police, the paramedics that transport him to the hospital where I work, the PA who saw my son, the doctor who saw my son, the nurses who saw my son, like any one of those people could have been the last person on earth that my son saw and talked to or touched. And I was reflecting on that about 2 days after it happened. I'm like, wow, these are the people that I call my team. This is my tribe. And that was really humbling. Like that was humbling, and I was honored. Like I was very honored to have all of these people to help me. And I know that we're all of those people for other people in distress. Mm-hmm. And if there isn't the teamwork and there isn't like leaning on each other and helping each other through good times and bad, teaching each other, like, then it's not worth it if you don't want to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, unless anybody has anything else, I think we can end it there. Thanks, guys, for your time. Appreciate y'all coming in, especially those working nights. I know this is a weird hour, so I appreciate you.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Kinder will let you back to your rot day now.
I know. Actually, I'm going to go to bed.